This is my true story. I went to visit my son in the city, the son everyone calls a millionaire, a success, a man with everything. I packed homemade food, cleaned my best shirt, and told myself he would be happy to see his father. But what I found behind his front door broke my heart in a way I didn't know was possible at my age. It showed me what money can do to a child, and what it can destroy. Before I tell you what happened, tell me where you're watching from and what time it is there. And please subscribe so my stories can reach more people. I woke up before the sun that morning, my hands shaking as I buttoned my old shirt, the only decent one I had left. I pressed it as flat as I could with my hands because I don't own an iron, and I wanted to look at least a little presentable for my son, the big city millionaire everyone talked about. I packed a small bag with the food I cooked the night before, his favorite dishes from when he was a boy, the ones he used to ask for again and again. I knew he had money now. He could eat anything he wanted, but I told myself maybe a taste of home would still mean something to him. I put in a small gift too, nothing rich, just a simple watch I saved up for, because I wanted him to have something from me that wasn't cheap in effort, even if it was cheap in price. I held that bag like it carried my whole heart, because in a way, it did. At the bus station, people rushed past me, busy with their own lives. I stood there quietly, an old man with a worn-out bag, waiting for the bus that would take me to the city where my son lived like a king. When the bus arrived, I climbed slowly, my knees aching with each step. But I didn't complain. Pain in the body is easier to bear than pain in the heart. I sat by the window, placed the bag carefully on my lap, and kept one hand on it for the whole trip. The road was long and bumpy, the seats hard, the noise loud, but I didn't mind any of it. I spent the hours thinking about my boy, about how small he once was when I carried him on my shoulders, about how proud I felt when he got his first job, about how far he had come. People on the bus talked about work, about bills, about struggles, but all I heard inside my head was my own hope. I pictured him opening the door with a big smile, saying, "Dad, you came." I imagined him taking the bag from my hands, happy to taste my cooking again. I imagined us sitting at his table, just talking for a little while, like father and son should. The closer we got to the city, the more nervous I became. My hands started sweating, my heart beat faster. I hadn't seen him in a long time. He called sometimes, sent money a few times, but visits became rare, and then they stopped. I always told myself he was busy. Important people are always busy. But in my heart, I still believed he had space for his father, even if it was small. When the bus entered the city, the buildings grew taller and brighter. Cars rushed past each other. People walked quickly, wearing expensive clothes and serious faces. I felt small, like a piece of the village had wandered into a different world. But even with all that difference, I kept telling myself one thing: my son lives here, and if my son lives here, then this place can't be completely foreign to me. I got off the bus, my legs stiff and tired. I asked for directions to his address, and people looked at me strangely when I said his name, like they couldn't believe an old man like me was connected to someone like him. Some even smiled politely, the kind of smile that says, "You don't belong here." I walked anyway, step by step, street by street, holding my bag tighter each time I felt out of place. When I finally reached his building, I had to stop for a moment just to look at it. It was tall, clean, shining, with glass doors and security at the entrance. This was not a place built for people like me, but my son lived inside, and that gave me courage. I told the guard his name, told him I was his father. The guard raised his eyebrows but checked the list, and then let me in. I could feel his eyes on my back as I walked away, probably wondering how a man like me could be father to someone so rich. I took the elevator, something I rarely do. My ears felt strange as it went up, my heart beating louder with each passing floor. I looked at my reflection in the elevator door, old face, tired eyes, wrinkled hands, and I thought, will he be ashamed of me? I pushed that thought away quickly because I didn't want to believe it. I told myself he would be proud, that he would see not just my worn clothes and old body, but the man who gave him everything he could when he had nothing. When the elevator doors opened, I stepped into a quiet hallway that smelled clean and expensive. I walked slowly to his door, reading the numbers carefully so I wouldn't make a mistake. When I saw his number, my heart jumped. This was it. This was where my son lived his big life. I stood there for a moment, fixing my shirt, wiping my hands on my pants, steadying my breathing. I shifted the bag in my arms and held it close one more time, like I was hugging him before seeing him. Then I raised my hand, ready to knock, carrying nothing but food, a small gift, and the hope that for one day I would feel like a father again. As I stood there in front of his door, holding my bag tight against my chest, my heart began to fill with the kind of hope only an old father can understand. I imagined the moment he would open the door. I imagined his face lighting up with surprise, his arms opening wide, his voice shouting my name with joy. I imagined him pulling me inside, telling me how much he missed me, how happy he was that I came all this way just to see him. I imagined him taking the bag from my hands, smiling at the familiar smell of my cooking, saying he had not tasted food like that in years. I imagined us sitting together at a big table in his fancy apartment, me watching him eat the same meals he loved as a boy. Him telling me stories about his life in the city, his success, his friends, his plans. I imagined that for at least one afternoon, I would feel like I still mattered in his world. The hallway was quiet, but inside my head it was full of pictures, memories, dreams. I remembered the days I used to walk him to school, holding his small hand so he wouldn't fall. I remembered the nights I stayed awake working extra hours so he could have things I never had. I remembered the pride I felt when he told me he got his first scholarship, the way he hugged me when he graduated, the tears in his eyes when he left for the city with nothing but ambition and a suitcase. Those memories gave me strength. They made me believe that no matter how long we had been apart, the bond between us was still there, waiting to be awakened. I imagined him dragging me around the apartment, showing me every room like a proud child showing off his drawings. I imagined him telling me about his business, how he built it, how hard he worked, how far he had come, and I imagined myself standing there with my old tired hands, not saying much, but feeling proud enough to burst inside. I imagined him introducing me to his friends one day, saying, "This is my father. He raised me. He made me who I am." I imagined hearing those words just once before I died. I imagined him asking about the village, asking if I was eating well, asking if I needed anything. I imagined him offering me a place to stay the night, maybe even insisting, "Dad, you came all this way." I imagined him saying, "Stay here." And I imagined myself saying yes, feeling warm for the first time in years, feeling like I had a home again, not made of walls, but of love. I imagined waking up the next morning in a soft bed, hearing him in the kitchen making tea for me the way I used to make tea for him. I imagined us sitting at a small table together like we used to when he was young, sharing simple food and simple words, nothing fancy, just father and son breathing the same moment. I imagined him looking at the watch I bought him, turning it over in his hands, realizing it wasn't expensive, but still precious. I imagined him saying he would wear it every day. I imagined the pride in his voice when he told people, "My dad gave me this." I imagined him putting his arm around me in a photograph, smiling not because he had to, but because he wanted to. I imagined him walking me back to the bus station later, staying with me until the bus arrived, telling me to call him any time. I imagined him saying he would visit soon. I imagined hugging him before I left, feeling his strong arms around me and thinking, "This is the boy I raised." I imagined him waving as the bus pulled away, and I imagined myself waving back with tears in my eyes, but happy tears, the kind that come when life gives you back something you thought you lost. These hopes were small, but they were everything to me. They were the dreams of an old father who had nothing left but love. I stood there at his door, my heart full, my hands trembling, ready to knock, ready to believe in something gentle again. I didn't know then that hope can be the most painful thing a man carries. I finally lifted my hand and knocked on his door, not too hard, just enough so he could hear. My heart was beating so loud I could hear it in my ears. I waited, holding my breath, staring at the handle like it might turn any second. But nothing happened, no footsteps, no voice, no sound from inside. At first, I thought maybe he was not home. Maybe he went out. Maybe I came at the wrong time. My heart dropped a little. but I told myself to be patient. So I knocked again, a little louder this time, and leaned closer to listen. That was when I heard it. Faint at first, then clearer. There were voices inside. Laughter, music, clinking glasses. My son was home. Not just home. He was having a good time. I froze, my knuckles still touching the door. I heard people talking, joking, moving around. Chairs scraped the floor. Glasses tapped the table. Someone turned up the music. It sounded like a party, like a celebration. My first thought was simple. Maybe he couldn't hear me over the noise. Maybe that was all it was. I knocked a third time, harder now, the kind of knock that echoes through a room. But again, nothing. No, who's there? No footsteps coming closer. No door opening. Just more laughter from the inside, more noise, more life that didn't seem to have space for an old man standing in the hallway with a bag of food in his hands. I pressed my ear closer to the door, feeling my face almost touch the wood. It felt wrong, like I was spying. But what else could I do? I had come so far just to see my son. I needed him to know I was there. I needed him to open that door. As I listened, I could make out the sound of his voice. Deep, confident, controlled. The voice of a man who had power and comfort in his hands. It was nothing like the young voice I remembered, but I knew it was him. A father always knows his child's voice. Hearing him so close but separated by one thin door made my chest ache. I told myself again that he probably just didn't hear me. The hallway was quiet, but inside his apartment, the sound of music and laughter filled the air. I stood straight, adjusted my shirt, and knocked one more time, putting all my hope into that sound. I waited. This time the laughter dimmed for a second. There was a pause. My heart lifted. Maybe he was coming. Maybe someone heard me. I wiped my sweaty hand on my pants and fixed my grip on the bag, ready to smile the moment the door opened. Instead, the voices inside came back even louder, as if they turned the volume up to drown out the sound from outside. The music rose. Someone laughed loudly, a big fake party laugh. I felt a small sting of confusion in my chest. I am not a smart man in big city ways, but I am not stupid either. I started to understand that this was not about noise. This was about choice. He was choosing not to answer. He knew someone was at his door. He just didn't want to know who. I stood there for what felt like a long time, my legs getting tired, my hand starting to hurt from knocking, my heart slowly sinking into a place I didn't want to feel. The hallway felt colder now. The walls felt higher. The bag in my hands suddenly felt heavier. I thought about leaving, just turning around and going back down the elevator, back to the street, back to the bus station. But something inside me wouldn't move. I did not come all this way to walk away from a closed door without knowing why it was closed. Then, through the laughter and the noise, I heard something that froze me in place more than the silence ever did. I heard my name. Not Dad, not Father, my actual name. My son's voice saying it, clear, sharp, close enough that I knew he was talking about me. My heart jumped, then dropped in the same second. If he was saying my name, it meant he knew I existed. Maybe he knew I was in the city. Maybe he knew I could show up. Maybe someone inside had asked him about me. I pressed my ear harder against the door, every muscle tight, every part of me hanging on his next words. The silence behind the door was no longer about not hearing me. It was about not wanting to. And standing there alone in that hallway, with music and laughter on the other side, and my own name drifting through the wood, I began to feel something worse than being ignored. I began to feel the truth getting ready to hit me. I stayed with my ear against the door, even though my chest already felt tight from the silence. I wanted to believe my son was saying something kind about me, something warm, something that made the long trip worth it. But the moment the music lowered a little, I heard his voice clearly, and each word hit me like a stone thrown straight at my heart. He laughed first, a loud laugh, the kind people use when they want to impress others. Then I heard him say, "Don't worry about my dad." He said it like I was a joke, like I was something to brush off. My heart sank, but I kept listening, Because sometimes a father needs to hear the truth, even when it burns. He continued, his voice casual and sharp. He's just an old man from the village. Those words cut me open. All those years I worked in the fields, broke my back, saved every coin to send him to school, gave him every chance I never had. And now I was just an old man from the village. He kept talking, and each word made the hallway feel smaller and colder. I don't want him showing up here embarrassing me, he said. The people around him laughed, real laughter, not polite laughter. Laughter that said they agreed with him. Laughter that pushed me lower than I had ever been pushed in my life. My hands shook so hard I almost dropped the bag of food I brought for him. The gift I wrapped carefully now felt like something stupid, like something a fool would carry. I stood there frozen, listening as my own son tried to erase me to impress his rich city friends. And he kept going. He doesn't fit in here, he said, like I was some dirty thing that didn't match the clean floors of his expensive apartment. He's not someone I want people to see. That was the moment something inside me cracked. I raised him. I fed him. I put clothes on his back. I taught him how to walk, how to hold a spoon, how to speak. And he was ashamed of me. My throat felt tight and my eyes burned. I bit my lips so hard I tasted blood, just to stop myself from making a sound. A father should never hear his child talk like that. A father should never find out that love he gave so freely turned into shame inside his own son's chest. Then I heard someone inside ask him, "Why don't you invite him? He's your father, right?" For a moment, I held on to that little question like a piece of rope in deep water. Maybe he would defend me. Maybe he would say something good. Maybe he would say something kind. But what he said next hurt worse than everything before. He replied coldly, "He's not part of my life anymore." Just like that. Like I was a stranger. Like I was a chapter he had closed. Like I was someone he wished had stayed far away. He said, "I made myself, not him." Hearing those words felt like a punch to the chest. After everything I did, after every sacrifice, after every night I went to bed hungry so he could eat, he said I had nothing to do with the life he built. He erased me with one sentence. He killed every memory we shared with a few cold words spoken in front of drunk friends. My knees weakened, I almost fell to the floor, but I held on to the wall, trying to stay standing even though my heart was no longer whole. I heard him laugh again, proud of the words he said, proud of the life he created by forgetting the man who gave him everything. The people inside kept laughing too. Their laughter mixed with the music, and it all felt like someone stomping on my chest while smiling. In that moment, I understood the truth I never wanted to face. My son was ashamed of me. Not because I hurt him, not because I failed him, but because I was poor, because I looked old, because I came from a place he wanted to erase from his story. That realization broke something deep inside me that will never fully heal. I stepped back slowly from the door, my hands empty, my heart open and bleeding. I didn't cry. I was too shocked to cry. I just stood there, breathing slowly, staring at the floor, listening to the son I loved treating me like garbage behind a door I paid for when he was young. I stayed one more minute, hoping maybe he would say something, anything, that wasn't cruel. But he didn't. He just kept talking, laughing, pretending I was nothing. And that was the moment I knew the words he said were worse than the silence. Silence hurts, but cruelty spoken out loud, that stays inside a father's heart forever. I stood there in the hallway, trying to pull myself together, but my hands kept shaking like they no longer belonged to me. I thought the worst was already said, but more words came through the door, each one pushing me further down until I felt like I was shrinking into the floor. One of his friends asked him if he ever planned to visit me back in the village. My heart stopped for a moment, hoping maybe my son would at least pretend to care, at least show a little respect when others were watching. But instead, he let out a tired sigh, the kind of sigh people give when talking about something useless or annoying, and he said, "There's nothing there for me. That place is dead. He's dead to me." Hearing that broke something inside me I didn't know could still break. It felt like he was burying me with his words while I was still alive. It felt like he wanted the world to believe he had no father, like he cut off every tie to the man who raised him with 2 hands that now trembled from age and work. Then the truth spilled out fully, raw and ugly. He said he never told anyone about me because he didn't want people to think he grew up poor. He said he created a new story where he built his life alone, where he climbed from nothing without any help. He didn't mention the years I carried sacks heavier than my body to earn school fees. He didn't mention the nights I stayed awake working so he could sleep safely. He didn't mention the food I didn't eat so he could have extra in his lunchbox. He erased everything. He reshaped his life by removing the man who gave him the foundation he now stood on proudly. Each sentence felt like another shovel of dirt thrown over my name, trying to bury it forever. He even joked about my old clothes, my worn-out shoes, the way I speak, the way I look. He said he didn't want his rich friends to meet someone like that. Someone simple, someone low. I never knew my son saw me like that. I never knew he carried that shame inside him. I thought he was busy. I thought life in the city pulled him away. I never imagined he was running from me like I was a stain he needed to hide. For a moment, I forgot how to breathe. The hallway felt tight, the air felt heavy, and I had to place my hand on the wall to steady myself. I wondered where I went wrong. I wondered when his heart turned cold. I wondered when the love I gave became a burden he pushed away. Then came the words that finally killed the little hope still beating inside my chest. He said, "If he ever comes here, I'll make sure the guards don't let him in. I can't have him showing up and ruining everything I built." That sentence destroyed me. My own son was planning ways to keep me away. Planning to lock me out like some stranger begging at his door. Planning to erase me completely from his future. Listening to that felt worse than any pain I have ever known, not even hunger, not even sickness, not even the nights I slept outside as a boy. This was a different kind of pain, the kind only a child can give to a parent, the kind that sits inside the chest and hurts with every breath. And then, as if life wanted to crush me even more, the door suddenly opened a crack. Not wide, just enough for a sliver of light to hit the hallway. I held my breath, thinking maybe he opened it to check. Maybe he sensed I was there. But it wasn't him. It was a stranger leaving the party. He didn't see me standing there, and the door closed again just as fast. But in that quick moment, I saw something through the gap. His apartment, full of laughter, drinks, expensive clothes, expensive people, and my son in the middle of it all, smiling like he had no past, no history, no father. That small glimpse felt like a punch to the heart. Because in that moment, I understood the full truth. He had built a life that didn't need me, didn't want me, didn't include me. I wasn't forgotten. I was removed on purpose. I stood there silently, my body heavy, my heart empty, my soul shaking. The truth was clear now, clearer than ever. My son didn't just forget me. He replaced me. And I realized I came all this way to knock on a door that no longer had a place for a father like me. I stood there staring at the floor, my legs shaking so badly I thought they would give out under me. The hallway felt colder with every second, like the walls were closing in around my chest. I could still hear my son's laughter from inside, but now it didn't sound like my son at all. It sounded like a stranger I never raised, a man who forgot everything except his pride. My fingers loosened, and the bag I brought for him almost slipped from my hand. I held onto it tightly, as if holding it would stop my heart from falling apart. But nothing could stop the weight inside me from dropping like a stone straight into my stomach. It hurt to stand there, but it hurt even more to move. I felt trapped between wanting to knock again and wanting to run far away. My breath came out slow and shaky. The kind of breath you take when your heart breaks quietly inside you without making any sound. I leaned against the wall to keep myself up. My knees went weak, and for a moment I thought I would drop to the floor right there. The shame burned inside me so deeply I felt it in my bones. A father shouldn't hear his child speak like that. A father shouldn't be treated like a burden, like a stain, like someone who doesn't belong. I thought about all the nights I carried him on my back when he was tired. I thought about how he used to fall asleep on my chest when he was little. I thought about how he used to run to me after school, smiling so big his cheeks stretched. Those memories crushed me because the man behind the door was no longer that boy. That boy died somewhere along the path he took to become the rich man who now laughed at the thought of being connected to me. My heart throbbed so hard it felt like someone was squeezing it with a cold hand. I never imagined I would hear my son call me an embarrassment. I never imagined he would feel ashamed to be my son. I never imagined I would stand outside his door like a beggar listening to him erase me with his words. The pain sat heavy in my chest, choking me, filling my throat with a tight lump that wouldn't go away. I wanted to cry, but the tears didn't come. Sometimes the hurt is too big for tears. Sometimes the heart breaks in silence because the pain is too deep to reach the eyes. I just kept standing there like a tree cut from the inside but still standing because it doesn't know it's dead yet. Then I remembered the long trip I made just to see him. I remembered sitting on the bus with the food on my lap, dreaming of a warm hug, dreaming of hearing him say, "Dad, I missed you." I remembered the way I smiled to myself thinking about surprising him. I remembered how proud I felt when people in my village talked about him, the millionaire son who made it big in the city. They said I must have raised him well. They said he must love me so much. And now here I was, watching my pride crumble into dust at my feet. The truth hit me over and over again. My son didn't want me. Not my love. Not my presence. Not the father who gave him everything he had. I felt a sharp pain in my chest and pressed my hand there, trying to calm myself. The hallway lights buzzed above me, making everything feel even more empty. I looked at the door one last time, hoping maybe, just maybe, it would open. Hoping he would come out. Hoping he would say something, anything that didn't hurt. But the door stayed closed. The laughter inside got louder, like life was moving on without me. Like I never mattered. Like I never existed in the story he told those people. I felt myself sinking, piece by piece, like an old structure collapsing after standing strong for so many years. My grip on the gift bag finally loosened, and it slid from my fingers. It dropped to the floor softly, but the sound echoed in my heart like thunder. I bent down slowly to pick it up, but halfway there, I stopped. I stayed bent over for a moment, gripping my knees, trying to breathe. I had never felt so small. I had never felt so alone. I had never felt so unwanted. When I stood up again, I felt like a different man, older, heavier, broken in a way no doctor could fix. I looked at the bag in my hands and realized I didn't belong there. Not in that hallway, not behind that door, not in the life my son created by cutting me out. And in that moment, I understood the collapse happening inside me wasn't just heartbreak, it was acceptance. A painful, slow acceptance that my son didn't see me as his father anymore. I stood in that hallway with the bag in my hands, feeling like the air around me had turned heavy enough to crush my chest. I looked at the door one more time, the door I imagined my son would open with joy. But now it just felt like a wall between two worlds, his world where he was proud, loud, rich, and shining, and my world where I was invisible, unwanted, forgotten. I held the food I brought, the food I cooked with shaking hands early that morning, hoping he would smile when he tasted it. But now the bag felt like it weighed more than my whole body. Every step I took back from that door felt like I was dragging chains behind me. My heart hurt so much I thought I might fall right there, but I kept moving because standing still felt even worse. I walked down the hallway slowly, each step echoing like a reminder of the love I carried that no one wanted to receive. I stopped halfway and leaned against the cold wall. The pain inside me felt sharp, but I forced myself to breathe through it. I told myself not to cry. I told myself fathers don't cry in hallways where their sons call them an embarrassment. I told myself to stay strong, even though I felt like a cracked old tree ready to fall after years of storms. I looked down at the bag again, the food, the gift, the simple things a father brings when he still believes he matters. And I knew leaving them inside the building would only remind me of the place where I no longer belonged. Then I reached the elevator, and for a moment, I couldn't press the button. My finger hovered there, shaking. Pressing it felt like accepting something permanent. Pressing it meant I was choosing to walk away. Pressing it meant I was letting go of the hope I carried for years. Hope that kept me alive when loneliness felt like a second skin. But I had to do it. So I pressed the button gently, and when the elevator doors opened, I stepped inside with the slow, heavy steps of a man who had aged 10 years in 10 minutes. Inside the elevator, I stood alone, staring at my reflection in the mirror on the wall. I barely recognized myself. My shoulders were slumped, my eyes looked empty, and my face looked older than ever. I saw the pain written all over me. I saw a father who tried, a father who traveled miles, a father who hoped, a father who was turned away without a word. I saw a man standing in the space between love and heartbreak, and I realized I had to let go. Not because I wanted to, but because holding on to someone who doesn't want you only destroys you slowly. When the elevator reached the ground floor, I stepped out and walked past the guard. He didn't look at me. He didn't greet me. To him, I was just another old man walking out of a place too fancy for someone like me. I walked outside, and the cold city air hit me hard, but at least it felt honest. The wind didn't lie. The street didn't pretend. The sidewalk didn't pretend I didn't exist. I walked to a small bench near the gate and sat down, letting the bag rest on my lap. I opened it slowly, took out the food, and placed it beside me on the bench. Not for my son. For myself. A reminder that I came with love, even when love wasn't returned. I sat there a long time, watching the people walk by. People who didn't know my story. People who didn't know the pain I carried inside me. I watched the building where my son lived, trying to decide if I should wait outside just to see him leave, but I knew it would only hurt more. I had already heard everything I needed to hear. I had already seen everything I needed to see. The son I raised wasn't the man behind that door. That man was someone new, someone who grew so far from his roots he couldn't even see where he came from anymore. Eventually, I stood up again. My legs were weak, but they carried me. I took one last look at the tall building, then turned away from it. I walked down the street slowly, feeling each step in my bones. I didn't rush. I didn't look back. Sometimes walking away is painful, but staying is worse. Sometimes love means stepping back when someone has already pushed you out. And as I walked, I felt something inside me settle. Not peace, not strength, but acceptance. Acceptance that my son had closed the door long before I ever knocked on it. I walked away from that building with slow steps, each one feeling heavier than the last, like I was dragging years of memories behind me. I didn't look back, not because I didn't want to, but because I knew the sight of that place would only cut deeper into the wound already tearing inside my chest. I reached the bus stop and sat on the hard metal bench, the plastic bag of food beside me, untouched, still warm, still waiting for someone who didn't want it. I stared at the cars passing, bright city lights reflecting off their windows, and I felt like I was watching a world I no longer belonged to. The city moved fast, loud, full of life, and I sat there feeling small and forgotten, like an old newspaper left on the sidewalk. I tried to breathe slowly, but each breath felt sharp, as if the cold air was slicing through the inside of my chest. My phone buzzed in my pocket, and for a moment I didn't want to look at it. I feared more pain, more disappointment, more reminders that I had been nothing but a shadow standing outside my son's world. But eventually, I took the phone out with shaking hands. There was a message on the screen. It said, "Dad, were you here? Why didn't you tell me?" Those words felt like a slap, a message sent too late, too empty, too clean compared to the dirty truth I heard behind that door. I stared at the text, thinking about how easy it was for him to pretend he cared when someone else might be watching. He didn't text me because he missed me. He texted because the idea of me showing up might ruin the story he told his rich friends. The message wasn't love, it was fear. Fear that someone might see the father he abandoned. Fear that someone might ask questions he didn't want to answer. I read the message again and again, each time feeling the pain twist deeper inside me. I thought about replying. I thought about sending a simple message. "I came to see you." But then I remembered his laughter. I remembered his words. I remembered how he said I was dead to him. I remembered how he said he didn't want me in his life. And suddenly, the idea of replying felt wrong. I was not going to beg for a place in his world. I was not going to explain myself to someone who erased me, so I slipped the phone back into my pocket and let the silence answer for me. Sometimes silence is stronger than any words a broken father can say. The bus arrived with a loud screech, and I got on slowly, feeling every bone in my body ache. Most of the seats were empty, so I sat near the window. The city looked different from the bus, cold, distant, glowing with lights that didn't warm anyone. I rested my head against the glass and let the ride carry me away from the place where I learned a truth I never wanted to face. My reflection in the window looked tired, older than I remembered, like the night carved new lines into my face. I closed my eyes, hoping to rest, but every time I blinked, I saw the door. I heard the laughter. I felt the words stabbing into my heart again. As the bus drove farther, the buildings grew smaller and less shiny, replaced by worn-out shops, cracked sidewalks, and the kind of quiet that felt honest. I held the bag of food close to my chest, feeling its warmth fade slowly. I thought about the meal I cooked with so much care. I thought about how I imagined us eating together. I thought about how I planned to sit at his table, talk about life, maybe hear him say he missed me. But now, the food felt like a reminder of my foolish hope, a reminder that my love didn't matter in his world. I didn't throw it away, though. I held it because it was the last piece of the dream I had before everything shattered. When I finally reached my stop, I stepped off the bus and walked down the quiet street toward the small room I rented. The night felt colder out there, but at least it didn't pretend to love me. I unlocked my door, stepped inside, and sat on the edge of my bed. For a long time, I didn't move. I just stared at the wall, replaying everything in my mind: the words, the laughter, the shame, the pain. I felt something inside me break for good. I knew our relationship would never be the same. I knew the son I raised didn't exist anymore, and I knew that sometimes the deepest pain a father feels is not when a son leaves, but when he realizes the son has already let go long before the father ever knew. I sat on the edge of my small bed, the room quiet enough for me to hear the slow, heavy beat of my own heart. The pain from earlier still sat deep inside my chest. Like a rock I couldn't lift off no matter how many times I tried to breathe it away. I looked at the bag of food on my lap, the same food I carried across the city with so much hope. Now it felt like a reminder of everything I lost in one night. I thought about sending my son a message, thought about asking him why he said those things, why he threw me away so easily, why he was ashamed of the father who gave him everything. But the longer I sat there, the clearer it became. I didn't need another answer from him. He already gave me all the answers I needed behind that door. He showed me exactly where I stood in his life. And sometimes the truth hurts more when it's spoken clearly. I placed the food on the table and sat back again, letting the cold air wrap around my shoulders like a thin blanket. I stared at the wall, but it felt like I was staring through it, into the past, into all the years I spent raising him, teaching him, protecting him, hoping he would grow into a man who remembered where he came from. I realized then that love alone is not enough to hold a family together. A father can give everything: time, sacrifice, strength, love. But if a child decides to forget, the father becomes nothing more than a shadow, standing outside a locked door. I wiped my face with my hands, not crying, just tired. Tired in a way only a parent can understand. The kind of tired that comes from loving someone who doesn't look back. That night, I knew I had to make a decision. Not for him, but for me. I couldn't keep breaking myself trying to fit into a place where I was clearly not wanted. I couldn't keep holding on to a version of my son that no longer existed. He moved on from me long ago, and all I did was hold on to memories while he erased me piece by piece. So I decided something simple, something painful, something honest. I would stop chasing a son who didn't want to be found. I would stop waiting for a message that didn't carry love. I would stop letting my heart depend on his silence. I would let him live the life he chose, even if that life had no place for me in it, not out of anger, but out of acceptance. I stood up slowly, feeling my knees crack under the weight of age and sorrow. I walked to the small window and opened it a little, letting the cool night air brush against my face. Outside, the street was quiet, a few streetlights flickering like they were tired too. I breathed in the air, trying to calm the storm inside me. And as I stood there, I understood something important. Sometimes the only way to protect your heart is to step back from the people who hurt it, even if they're your own blood. I told myself that moving back from him didn't mean I stopped loving him. It just meant I loved myself enough to stop bleeding for someone who didn't care if I was hurting. I closed the window, walked back to the table, and sat down again. I took the food out of the bag, placed it on a plate, and ate it quietly. Every bite tasted different than I expected. Not like comfort, but like closure. This was the food I made for him. Food I wanted to share with him. But eating it alone reminded me of the truth. Sometimes the people we raise grow into people we no longer recognize. And sometimes those people forget the hands that fed them. After I finished eating, I cleaned the table, put away the leftovers, and washed the plate slowly, letting the warm water calm my shaking hands. By the time I dried the plate, my decision felt settled inside me, heavy but steady. I sat on my bed again, turned off the lights, and closed my eyes. The room went dark, but it was a peaceful kind of darkness. The kind that gives rest instead of fear. I whispered to myself, not to him, not to anyone else. Enough. Enough hurting. Enough hoping. Enough waiting. It was time to live my life, even if that life was simple, quiet, and alone. It was better to walk through life with honesty than to stand outside a door full of lies. The next morning, I woke up before the sun. The room still dim, the air cold enough to make my bones ache. I sat on the edge of my bed for a long moment, letting the silence settle around me like a thin blanket. My mind drifted back to the night before, the words I heard, the shame I felt, the way my heart cracked open in that hallway. I tried to take a deep breath, but even the air felt heavy, as if the pain from yesterday had followed me into the new day. I stood up slowly, stretching my stiff back, and looked around my small room. It wasn't much, but it was honest. No fake smiles, no hidden voices, no doors that stayed closed in my face. Just 4 walls that held me without judgment. I walked to the sink, splashed water on my face, and stared at my reflection in the small, cracked mirror. My face looked older, worn, tired in a way no sleep could fix. I saw lines that weren't there years ago, lines carved by years of hard work, years of loneliness, years of trying to be a good father. But as I kept looking, I also saw a kind of strength I didn't notice before. Not loud strength, not proud strength, but quiet strength. The kind that grows in men who survive hurt after hurt and still wake up the next morning. I placed my hand on the mirror, right over my reflection's heart, and whispered in my mind, "You did your best." Because I did, I gave everything I had, and a father cannot do more than give everything. I sat down at the table and ate a little of the leftover food. It tasted different today. Simpler, softer, like the weight of last night had drained the flavor from it. Still, I ate slowly, reminding myself that life didn't stop because my heart was bruised. The world didn't stop turning because my son turned away from me. I had to keep moving too, even if each step hurt. As I chewed, I let my thoughts wander back through my life. The nights I worked late so he could study. The mornings I left home early just to save enough money for his school fees. The small sacrifices I made without thinking. I remembered how proud I felt the day he left for the city, how I walked home smiling even though my pockets were empty. I remembered telling everyone in the village that my son was going to achieve great things. I remembered the pride in my chest when I heard he became a millionaire. And then I remembered the crushing pain of hearing that same son erase me from his life just to shine in front of others. After breakfast, I stepped outside and sat on the small bench near the door. The morning air was cold but honest. I watched people walking to work, kids running to school, old men sweeping the street. Life was simple around me. Nothing fancy, nothing shiny like the world my son lived in. But for the first time in a long while, I felt like I was exactly where I belonged. Not because I wasn't good enough for his world, but because his world didn't know how to value someone like me. Someone who loved without conditions. Someone who gave without expecting praise. Someone who remembered where he came from. My heart still hurt, but the pain felt clearer now, like a wound that finally started to close. As I sat there, I thought about the message he sent. Those words, "Dad, were you here?" floated in my mind again, but they no longer twisted inside me like a knife. I realized something important. He wanted me in a way that cost him nothing. He wanted to look like a good son without being a good son. He wanted the image, not the responsibility. And I finally understood that answering him would only open the door for more hurt. So I made peace with my silence. I made peace with letting him live his life while I lived mine. Maybe one day he would feel the emptiness of the path he chose. Maybe one day he would remember the father who raised him. But that was not my hope anymore. A father can hope for many things, but he cannot force love where love does not live. I stood up from the bench and looked at the morning sky. It was turning light blue, the sun rising slowly behind the clouds. I felt the warmth touch my skin, soft at first, then steady. And in that moment, I told myself something true. I may not have a millionaire son in my life, but I still have myself, my dignity, my heart, my story, and no closed door can take those things away from me. I walked back inside, ready to start my day, carrying a quiet strength inside me that no betrayal could kill. My final thought settled deep in my chest, like a calm breath. A millionaire son means nothing if he has a poor heart. And with that truth, I let the pain rest and walked forward.